Hi, everybody. This is Dionne Mischler with Inside Sales by Design. I hope you're doing really well today. Thank you for joining the Sales Development Summit. My name is Dionne Mischler. I am the CEO of Inside Sales by Design. And a little bit of background so you kind of know who you're listening to today. I have been in sales and technology for 20 some odd years at this point. I have built and scaled numerous inside sales teams and firmly believe in seeking knowledge and in the form of, I try to read about a book a month, staying abreast of what's current for not only inside sales, but also leadership. And then I'm also a firm believer in really running after wisdom, which is applying all that knowledge into actual daily life. And so that to me is the difference between knowledge and wisdom. So what we're going to talk about today is leading your team to peak performance. And we're going to dive right in. These are short snack-sized videos for you. These are, and the things that we're going to cover today, I want to share with you that I have done, not only as with myself as a practitioner, but now when I talk with folks and talk with clients, and I also do some mentoring, these are the things that we talk about. So if you are new to leadership, and I understand from a sales development standpoint, not only new to leadership from a sales development standpoint, but maybe sales development is new to your organization. Maybe inside sales is new. If no one really kind of shared with you what that looks like kind of at a high level, these are just a handful of things that you're going to be doing in your newfound role. Welcome to the club. And really, as we kind of go through our 15 minutes or so here together, we're going to talk about all of these components. So no need to spend a whole lot of time here. Really also, you can think about it in this way for yourself. If you are leading a brand new SDR team, what you really want to be able to do is understand a framework. Just like we would never build a house without blueprints. When I go and would start a team, or now when I talk with folks, I say, hey, do you have a sales manager playbook, right? Do you have a framework for your team? And if you don't, definitely start one. From there, your framework and your build out, you start building out on that framework. So you're going to take your blueprint and start putting some meat on the bone. And then you're really going to start codifying it. So what I've seen is some organizations either have a lot of documentation that nobody uses, or documentation that is somewhat used, or there's no documentation and everything is tribal knowledge. None of it is bad. Wherever you are is where you are. If you are looking to establish an SDR team, if you're looking to establish any team, quite frankly, these are the things that need to be in place. Number one, it gives us a clear line of sight to what success looks like. And if you're going to lead a team, you can't scale what you can't measure, and you can't measure what you don't understand. So definitely keep these things in mind as we talk about leading our team to really be the best that they can be. At the end of the day, that's what we're here for as leaders. And of course, we want to definitely make sure we're coaching our people. So we're going to really talk on 5 rapid fire topics today. What is it all about when we're a leader? Are we giving our team perspective? Do we have a system in place? Because guess what, folks? For those of us that are spinning up a new team, it's on us. Do we have self-awareness as a leader to understand the impact our words are having? Do we have the ability to harness and use resources appropriately? So first and foremost, when you signed on to become a leader, hopefully you raised your hand. It's not about you. It's not about me as a leader. When we sign on to become a leader, it is about being the type of leader that our team needs us to be. So for example, if you have a new team, you probably are going to need to be hands-on and a little bit more tactical in some of your coaching. If you have a more established team, you're probably not going to necessarily dive as much into the how and be tactical. You may need to provide a little bit more visionary direction. So when we talk about, it's not about us, right? It's really about being who our team needs us to be at the end of the day in order to achieve the results we need to achieve. And above all, remember that we manage things and we lead people. We will manage a system, we manage a process, we manage our CRM system, we manage our reporting. We lead people, right? So just something to keep in mind. And we were talking about it just a minute ago. We absolutely execute for today and we strategize for tomorrow. So the key takeaway for really what is leadership all about for you leading a new team or even an established team is making sure that you have your framework, number one, and your framework is really your North Star. And you break it down into three key areas. What are you doing? What is your team doing? Why is your team doing it? How do you get there, right? And that allows you to really make sure you've got the strategy set in place so that when you go into some of those meetings with other leaders and executives at your organization, you can say unequivocally, here's our North Star, here's what we're doing, here's what we're doing. And then we talk about execute for today is, as folks are interested, sometimes folks that are at a little bit visionary level don't necessarily want to know what the execute for today looks like. That's okay. That's our job. If we're leading our sales team, that's really for us to take advantage of and to understand. So that's the takeaway. The other takeaway, the subset A of that, is recognizing that as you go into some of those executive meetings, you are going to be at a visionary level. And as you come out, your reps may be coming up to you going, hey, I have this lead and I don't know what to do, or I had this great conversation with this prospect. You're going to get tactical pretty quick. So just make sure you're able to keep that compartmentalization for yourself. The second thing that we really need to provide for our teams is what you're looking at here, overall a goal. I've talked with folks, and there are still some organizations that don't operate on a quota system or a goal. My question is, how do you know you're successful? What is your benchmark of success, and how do you know if you get there? So we definitely want to make sure we have a goal, our North Star. This is the hill we're taking today or this year. That may be new customer ads, that may be growth within your client base, that may be a new segment. You got to know what the goal is. From there, you really want to start identifying the purpose. This is your team's why statement. Why does your team show up every day, and why should anybody care? You also want to provide some perspective. So perspective is really comes from your goal and your purpose, right? So when we start talking about motivating our team or having our team be motivated internally, the more we can all get on the same page with alignment of here, our team serves a purpose and our purpose is X, which aligns to our company's purpose, which is Y. It gives everybody some perspective. And then really sliding into that is clarity. So many times there is so much ambiguity in a system, nobody knows who's doing what. So we really want to, clarity means we have clear roles and responsibilities. Clarity means that we have service level agreements. It means we have rules of engagement. It means that we all understand, we know and understand what our goal is, what our purpose is. It saves us from the questions of, hey, why didn't somebody want this lead? Well, you know what? This particular lead and the demographics didn't necessarily fit our ideal client profile, whatever the case may be. All of these things work together to get to our fourth component, which is execution, which is, do we as leaders have these components in place that remove as much friction as possible from the system so our team can execute at a higher level? Our teams are not here to, I had a rep one time years ago ask one of my SDRs to help with his travel arrangements. Nope. Granted, in his defense, she used to be in that office in a different role. However, right? So we need to make sure, that's a kind of a very blatant example, but we need to make sure that we are removing as much ambiguity from the system as possible so that when the exceptions come up, they're few and far between, and we can still move fairly quickly. We want to, as a leader, we want to understand as we start looking at our goal and our purpose, right? How do you define your company's culture? How do you find your team's culture? Are they aligned? And does everybody know what your culture is? For example, I had a team years ago, they were amazing. And we were kicking butt and taking names. This was a team where that's what we wanted to do. I've always told my teams, I don't need you to work 60 hours. I need you here 40 because I want you to have a life, right? If we need to, we need to. But if we don't, I don't want to make that the norm. We're not going to wear how many hours we work as a badge of honor. What we want to be able to do is when you're here, you're here. So be here. And we're going to work hard. We're going to do our job. We're going to be really good at what we do. And we're going to be very successful with that. That team, we all knew what we were doing. They were part of the interview process. They would basically almost own the interview process and bring people on that they wanted to work with. It was a really, really, really great, high-functioning team, which is awesome. So my question for you when we think about perspective is, how would you define your culture? Does everybody know what that is? Does your team have a goal and a purpose? Do they have clarity to move forward? Which leads us to the third piece, which is the functioning system. So we have our perspective. So the takeaway for section 2 is, does everybody know your culture? Does everybody understand their goal? Does everybody understand why they're there? Especially from an SDR perspective. It can be the most thankless role in the company. From there, we want to be able to talk about our system. Folks, we're sales leaders. We own an awful lot. Even if you have some of these components in your organization, everything from alignment down to reporting. So what I want to share with you as you look at this slide and you look at these 8 pieces, and you can do a quick screen share, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well would you basically give yourself? So alignment, how well does your team align to the company goal? Job description, how aligned is your job description to getting the right person you need? How about your one-on-ones and coaching? Is it consistent? And consistent means that if you do call a coaching session or a one-on-one, people don't think they're getting fired. So give yourself, grade yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 for these things. And as you look at this, there may be 1 or 2 things that kind of pop out at you that if you spent some time on would make your team move and produce a little bit better results if that's what you're after. So that's your homework for this slide. Because at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter how tools we have if you don't know how to use them. And part of that functioning system is really onboarding and training. And it's really about assimilation. It really goes back to our perspective section on the goal. This team exists too. And here's why. It's a Mad Lib for yourself, right? So we want folks that are going to come in and drink the Kool-Aid, right? We want to bring on folks where we all believe in the same thing. So when you think about your onboarding strategy, that's what the goal is. It's not about whether or not your onboarding strategy is perfect. It's about whether your onboarding strategy and program works and delivers results. So if you have nothing in place, I did the below table in Word in just a few minutes. Start putting in some of the basic building blocks you know that a new hire is going to need to know how to do in order to be successful. If you have an onboarding program, maybe revisit that if you haven't in a while, or even if you have, and just make sure that it's achieving what you need it to achieve. Same thing with sales training. So a lot of folks will spend time on their sales onboarding program, which is great, right? And oh, by the way, as part of your onboarding, you're going to want to put some assessments in there. You then want to make sure that you have a sales training program as well. This is not product training. This is not internal training. This is not finance coming to you and saying, hey, I need you guys to do some training on CRM because I need the reps to check a box. That is important. Do not get me wrong. What is also important is making sure that we are encouraging our teams to take their craft seriously and really own some ongoing development. So if you have a new team, especially from an SDR perspective, there is a ton of material out there that you can do for yourself that if you're not going to have budget for training, you can absolutely do. So I encourage you to take a look at some of those different resources that are out there. Make it part of your DNA, put together a training editorial calendar. That is a good takeaway for here. That is a fancy way of saying create an Excel spreadsheet or Google sheet with a month or week and a topic and who's responsible for researching that particular topic and coming back to the team with it. Making sure you're doing some live call feedback. So you want to, if we're talking about leading our team, and if we give our team a goal and a purpose, and we talk about everybody is a professional, we need to make sure that we are doing ongoing training. We need to make sure that we're not only talking the talk, but walking the walk when it comes to being perceived as professionals. And every professional I've ever known and worked with continually trains and has a coach. So my equivalent is, would you want to go to a doctor that graduated in 1975 and never did anything else? No. Right? So, and there are some salespeople that have been doing this for a while that they have a tried and true methodology for themselves and they're never going to change. So we need to be very, very cognizant of tripling down, as a friend of mine says, on what we're good at and making sure that we're continually learning on areas that maybe we need to improve upon. And really, at the end of the day, we need to keep things as simple as possible and as specific as possible. So in our system, making something simple is not easy, right? Einstein has that quote that it takes somebody really smart to make something as simple as possible, yet no simpler, something along those lines. So, and be very specific. This is an example of a calendar. So if you do not have that editorial calendar for yourself, if we go back to our functioning system, our 8 pillars, put something together so you have it there and create a master calendar. If you're in an Outlook, you can definitely do that. Same thing if you're using Gmail. You can create a master training calendar for your team and go ahead and do that. Again, we talked about clarity from a perspective when we were back on the perspective slide. When we start outlining some of these things, not to the point where we are eking out all serendipity, but from a standpoint of people know what to expect, we drive clarity. And they go, oh, I've got a team meeting coming up and this is the topic, or I've got a one-on-one I need to prepare for. Well, that's what we're doing. And if we go back to the number 3, that slide there that talked about the system, that's what we're talking about too, is how clear are we as a leader on expectations? Now, that may sound funny and you may go, man, I've already told everybody. Or why do I have to repeat myself? Or it's really, really clear to me. What we need to be very mindful of is when we are building a team, when we are motivating a team, when we are responsible for a team, time moves fast. And what you say in January will be forgotten by February. And when you have new hires that join in June, they didn't hear you in January. So what we want to be able to do with the system and setting expectations is recognize that we're going to be repeating ourselves. And it's all okay. Because if then we go back to our culture, we need to reinforce that. We own that. So something to keep in mind as we start looking at, these are just examples that kind of go back to that self-functioning of the functioning system as far as what this would potentially look like for you. And then reporting. When we talk about reporting, we're gonna talk a little bit about this. Most folks have too much. I've never heard anybody say I don't have enough. So what I will say is, from a best practice perspective, having a really, really accurate, impactful dashboard for your reps to look at goes a long way. So, and it should align to their goals. So now we're back to the perspective piece. As a leader, have you provided goals? Have you provided perspective? And then really fast forward to the reporting with the expectations. Does the reporting reflect the goals with clarity of the expectations that have been shared that the rep has signed on for? You may need to go back and revisit this, and that's okay. We all do, right? So, and really at a glance, folks should be able to know whether or not they are successful. Same for you as a leader. So if you're leading this new team, you want to make sure you've got some clarity for yourself as well. Because at the end of the day, if we don't know what's going on, and we can't measure it, we can't improve upon it, and we can't pay on it. So again, from a leadership perspective, the more we have clarity on something, the less ambiguity we have, the more our reps can focus on execution and getting things done. And that all stems from, if we go back to the perspective, if we go back to the system pieces, and now the reporting is definitely part of that as well. So for you, if you need to look at some of your different reporting, go ahead and benchmark that. What, if anything, needs to be improved, and then go ahead and have a plan to fix it. And keeping in mind, if you do have some information that is codified on a scale of 1 to 10, how strong is it? Meaning, can somebody come in tomorrow, read your documentation, and move? Coaching definitely works. Grade yourself, folks. Sit down and ask yourself some of these hard questions, especially if you've got a newer team in this model. Let's talk a little bit about self-awareness. As leaders, we need to understand our mode of communication. We need to understand who we are, how we sound. We need to understand the impact that we have as a leader. I'm not saying you're responsible for how people feel, and this is not therapy. What I am saying is we need to know ourselves very well, and we need to understand sometimes how we land as a person. So for you, there's two pieces here. Pick three, I called it adjectives, but really pick 3 words that would describe your leadership style. Are you fierce? Are you calm? Are you open? Are you available? Are you fierce? Are you numbers driven? Are you analytical? Write them down and then be that person. Check in with yourself and get an accountability partner every 30 days or so. Really, we say this a lot. We say 2 things a lot at Inside Sales by Design. One is egregious, massive compartmentalization. And then the second piece is know thyself. And so the bottom piece there that really talks about, are you a thinker, feeler, or doer? And really, what does that mean to be those, to kind of have those characteristics? It's not a blanket. And again, this isn't therapy. This is really about knowing ourselves, where I'm a doer and I'll do all day long. And so sometimes that style can definitely not have a good impact on somebody who's more of a feeler. And so if I'm going to communicate with somebody who I may think is that, I need to make sure that I am communicating effectively. That's all this means, is we want to know ourselves. We want to be able to be aware of who we are, what we are, how we're doing, how we're communicating. And we want to be really aware of the other person we're communicating with at the end of the day. You know, last thing here is we want to harness our resources. So we talked about leadership isn't about us. We talked about the fact that we really need to provide perspective for our teams. We talked about being able to have a functioning system. And now we really need to understand how to harness resources. So with that, my question for you is, who's at your table? You are the master and mistress of your dominion. I'm not saying you're going to label people. What I am saying is you need to know who your folks are. So kids are a great example. Our daughter here, she is very confident. She's ready to go off on her own and do whatever she's going to do. She was made for the stage, right? She's happy about that. She's a natural born leader and won't let her brother forget it. Our son over here as well is actually also quite independent. He actually decided to walk to the car by himself the other day. We were apparently not moving fast enough. So he's kind of our laid back, yeah, I got it, I'm totally capable, right on, right? And so really when you look at your team, when you look at who you're reporting to, when you look at the other departments you're working with, not only if we go back to knowing ourselves, we need to understand who's at our table. And it doesn't mean that we don't do something, right? So it doesn't mean that, oh, that person's been here forever, I can't talk to them, especially if you've got this team that you're leading. It's really about how do we coach to get the most out of folks, right? So I want to keep that in mind as you are leading your team to, quite frankly, hopefully over exceed some expectations. You want to understand who's at the table, what makes them tick, what are they motivated by, so that when you do your one-on-one coaching sessions, you can really tap into getting them, lighting their fire at the end of the day. Because if we go back to our goal, right, our second piece on perspective, we want to ban low performers and we want not high performing teams. So for us, right, or for you, if your team's mission is we are a team of sales professionals who strive for excellence in everything we do, man, imagine if you use that in your hiring. You want people that aren't afraid of that. So don't be afraid to put words to that. If you're going to lead your team needs an identity. What is your team's identity? And if we go back to the second piece, your goal, your perspective, your purpose identifies that. It allows you to hire right, and it allows you to know who's at your table so that you can motivate them to get to where you need to be. I also want to talk a little bit about your next steps and resources. So really sitting down and understanding why you decided to become a leader. And ask yourself, you'll notice throughout our time here together, there's a lot of self-reflection and there's a lot of, hey, sit down and think and look at where you're at maybe on this scale. There's a lot of grading that's going on, and grading isn't a bad thing. I don't want people to be afraid of numbers. I want you to look at these exercises from a standpoint of, what do I need to start doing? What do I need to stop doing? Looking at this and saying, what type of leader do I need to be? And then also, what actions are you taking to make this happen? Do you have an overall training, coaching, and one-on-one calendar? And if you don't, why not? And then what are the 3 adjectives you've come up with? I would love to hear what you've come up with. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Please personalize your message. I'd love to hear what 3 words you came up with. I'll be happy to share mine with you as well. As you have gone through these 5 sections, there's probably been a lot. We've covered a lot of ground. And as you have gone through some of these, maybe some of them you go, oh yeah, I got that, Dionne, I'm good. And maybe some you went, I think I need to revisit this piece. Fantastic. There's a really great book called Mastering the Rockefeller Principles. And in there, it talks about really not tackling any more than 3 major initiatives at a time. I have been doing this for a while, and I think, I'll take accidentally successful, but I think that mantra has really bled into a lot of successful project management. And so my feedback to you is, as you revisit, as you've scored yourself on some of these things, if you scored, a 3 on, for example, your onboarding, and you think, and you're going to be hiring people in Q1, you might want to relook at my onboarding plan. So as you go back, as you look at some of these things, plot out some major projects, because creating or evaluating an onboarding program is not easy, and it can be time consuming. So make sure you plot your actions quarterly and appropriately. You don't want to overload yourself and just set yourself up to fail before you even begin. And then here are some of the resources I highly recommend taking a look or taking a listen at some of these. And from there, I want to thank you so much for your time. Again, I really, really hope this was helpful for some folks. Take a look at some of those resources. You can definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. You can visit our website. And I'd love to hear from you, and love to hear how you're going to use some of these to lead your team in 2018 to exceed all of the expectations that are there for you. So thank you so much. Have a great day. and I'll talk with you soon.